in a race against the elements in order to cut the scheduled volume of timber before the coming of spring. Getting the timber out of the woods is a difficult problem. Some of the logs are transported by horse-drawn sleds to rivers and lakes, where they're piled on the ice to await the spring thaw. And where the banks of rivers and lakes are inaccessible to sleds, logs are sent tobogganing down icy chutes. With the end of winter, the waterways open to traffic, and life takes on a quickened tempo. Now the streams leap and roar, and the great harvest of logs cut in the winter and piled on the ice continues its journey from the forest to Shelter Bay and other towns built by the Tribune on the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Occasionally, the frozen logs are difficult to dislodge, and then dynamite is used to break the jam and send the timber on its way. At the mouth of the river, the logs are stopped by booms and fed onto conveyors which carry them to the barking drums. These are huge steel cylinders in which the logs revolve and toss against one another. By friction, the bark is removed, and the logs emerge slick and shiny. Then they're conveyed to the waiting ships and piled in the holds and on the decks. At Franklin, 100 miles or so southwest of Shelter Bay, is another Tribune town. Here, logs drop from a sluice directly into the ship's hold, where crews arrange them in ship-shape manner. A few miles farther south is Como Bay, the newest Tribune settlement, where the Tribune is building a new town, power plant, and paper mill. All during the navigation season, from June to October, ships are loaded and push off for the Tribune paper mill at Thorold at the western end of Lake Ontario. The trip requires from a week to 10 days. During a single season, as much as 150,000 cords of pulpwood are shipped by boat from the timberlands to the mill, where they're converted into newsprint paper. As soon as a steamer arrives at the mill, the logs are lifted from the hold by derricks. Then they're picked up by a chain conveyor and stacked in mountainous piles containing as much as 100,000 cords of wood. Such a reserve stock is needed since the Tribune consumes more than 2,000 tons of paper in a single week. Time was when the logs were handled by men. Then this ingenious device, the orange peel grab, was invented. Logs are now carried from the piles to the conveyors more quickly and with little hazard to the workmen. The grab picks up a load in its jaws, swings it around, and deposits it onto the cable conveyor. At a transfer junction, the logs go on to another conveyor that carries them to rotating washing drums. Then they're discharged into a sorting conveyor and inspected by men who select logs for both mechanical and chemical processes. Newsprint used by the Tribune consists of approximately 25% chemical pulp and 75% mechanical pulp. Mechanical pulp gives paper the porous-like characteristics that enable it to absorb ink on high-speed newspaper presses. Chemical pulp gives it strength and flexibility. Logs that pass inspection are placed on the saw tables and are cut to 2-foot lengths. Those with slight defects are placed on the carriage of the woodpecker, a name given this machine by the Tribune engineers who developed it at the mill. All defects are removed before they move on. From the sorting conveyor, some logs go to the chipper, which reduces them to small chips, which are sent to the digester to be mixed with acids in the chemical or sulfite process. Complete control of chips and acid is maintained in the sulfite digester in order to obtain a uniform pulp. There is no deviation from the highest standards throughout the mill to ensure a superior grade of strong white paper. Logs for the mechanical process are placed in a battery of grinders, each of which can transform 12 cords of wood into high-grade pulp every 24 hours. The logs are forced under pressure against huge grindstones. Water flows over them continuously, and from the bottom of the machine issues a steady stream of pulp. At frequent intervals, samples are taken for analysis as a check on quality. Both mechanical and sulfite pulps are thoroughly combined in mixing tanks with chemicals to color and brighten the paper. The pulps are then beaten together, more water is added, and the mixture is pumped into the paper-making machine where it flows onto wire screens that form an endless belt. As it passes over the screens, the water drains off and the forward motion of the screens causes the pulp fibers to interlace and become paper. When the paper leaves the screens, it passes between two large rollers that squeeze out still more water. Then it goes through another series of rollers that squeeze and dry it further. Finally, it passes through 32 drying cylinders filled with live steam and covered with blankets to absorb any remaining moisture. The final touch is given by steel calendar rollers that polish the paper and give it a smoother finish. Next, it is rewound on steel spindles and wrapped in extra heavy paper made at the mill from the coarser fiber screened from the newsprint pulp. Paper has been made from trees. The next step is to transport it from the paper mill to Tribune Tower. Into the hold of one of the Tribune's fleet of ships go the rolls of paper, weighing approximately 8